Are we still there?
Yeah, well, I'm still there. I'm still there.
I'm still driving home.
You said it was a long drive.
We celebrate a trailblazer whose courage, determination, and resilience changed history.
Dhillon becoming the first RCMP officer to wear a turban.
I would rather be remembered as a good police officer. I rebelled against the system.
Absolutely.
In that very moment. That spark lit a fire. That fire turned into a national debate. I got people who would say, you're changing our culture. This is a symbol of Canada. How dare you think that you are to be considered equal here?
I guess it's just an inevitable change. I can't say I'm delighted.
Stinks. Yeah, me too. I don't think it should be allowed.
I wasn't prepared to give up my identity, my relationship with my heritage, legacy of my father.
Like you're competing with yourself. Be 1% better every single day.
Leadership starts with your own self.
You might have to think hard about this one. If you didn't become an RCMP officer, what was the alternative? Today's guest is Senator Baltej Singh Dhillon, a man who was rejected by the system, but he refused to give up. His trust in himself, in his path, and in his approach led him to places that he could have never imagined. He faced a lot of resilience, a lot of resistance, and overcame all of that through one belief. And we're going to touch on that today. Senator, welcome.
Thank you, TJ. Wonderful to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Senator, let's start with just the rejection itself.
Yeah.
We all face rejection, but a lot of times we use that rejection and we kind of go down a different path. You went to break that door back down. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was in pursuit of a dream. It was in pursuit of my passion. It was in pursuit of something that I thought was bigger than myself. And certainly when you come to those kinds of moments of clarity, of understanding your purpose, then I think you would do a lot to get to your end goal. And so when I decided, it was a conscious decision, that this was a space where I could serve as an RCMP officer. And when I got confirmation by other police officers who shared with me that I would do well. And there was a need for my culture, my language, my perspective, representation, to better serve the community and also meet the mandate of public safety and what the RCMP went out to do, which was represent the community and respond to the needs of the community. So when all that came together, it was absolutely crystal clear for me that this was my destiny. I know many people feel that way about many things, and it's an incredible place to be when you have that level of clarity, the confirmation, your own internal sort of sense, and then coming up against a wall after that. So when that moment, when that day, when that space that I walked into, which first started out actually quite good, because I got the call from my friend who was a police officer, RCMP, who encouraged me, who was a recruiting officer, encouraged me to apply. And he said, come on in. We've got some great news for you. And I went, I was all dressed up, ready to sign papers and so on. And when I got to the RCMP detachment, I met with Bob Rogalski, Corporal Rogie. That's how we got to, he would call me Baltej and I would call him Rogie. We were on that level. And he said, this is fantastic, Baltej. You've passed all the exams. You've done well. And this is the day we've been waiting for. So I'm going to have some papers for you to sign. And we're going to get you off to training. And I was, think about that day, TJ, where you got to a place where you were now walking into your dream job. This is what you've been aspiring to. That was me that day. And when that happened, I was top of the world. And it was only seconds later, he said, oh, and just as a, something that we need to cover off, the RCMP uniform policy does not allow for headdresses other than the forage cap. So, and you'll also have to shave. And it was a matter of fact for him. He was just sharing this as, just an add-on thing. It's just something that you need to be alive to, aware of, at some point do that. And that's exactly where everything came to a screeching halt. All of that hope, that dream, that, excitement, that satisfaction of being able to get into the space, all came to it was confusion. I was embabulated. I didn't understand if we were coming or going, because everything shifted in one moment. I said, well, what was clear for me was that that's not what I was prepared to do. I wasn't prepared to give up my identity, my relationship with my heritage, my, legacy of my father, who at his funeral, the priest at the temple said, at the Gurdwara said, that if you want to visit with my father, come see his son. They had put that legacy on me. So it was never a question. I was not going to walk away from that. So I said, thank you. I rejected the offer. And I walked away. Now, it's important also, I think I should mention, that while the RCMP was where I would have liked to have worked, it wasn't the only department I applied to. I applied everywhere because my intention, goal, objective was to become a police officer, not an RCMP officer. And so I still had hope that some other door would open for me and some other place where I would be welcomed and I could serve. So it wasn't the end of the struggle, if you will, and I certainly wasn't prepared to take a no for an answer.
That's incredible. So, I mean, this is great context because, my understanding was that there was a no right out of the gates, but that wasn't the case. So you went through everything, all the trainings, all the, the requirements, the tests, and then got the no.
Correct.
So that's even more devastating. Like one is, that door's never open for you. It's never designed for you. So it's like, let's not go down that path. But you were already down that journey.
Well, it was, you qualify.
Yeah.
You just don't look the part.
Yeah.
So sorry.
And so what was that moment like? So, I mean, you had, like you said, it was a dream. Like you were at the top, like I finally made it.
Yeah.
You're ready to sign. And now you've got like you said, your identity. This is everything about you. And it's not just you, it's your father and, the culture, the religion, like everything tied in one. And the only thing separating is one signature.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, it felt like a betrayal, to be honest with you, right? At that moment, this was my friend. They did not know who I was. Of course, 2 years I've spent working with them, knowing them. But there was also confusion, lack of understanding on their part about what it means to be a Sikh,
right? And
our identity and how we relate to these articles of faith. For them, it was a dress. For us, it's much more. It's legacy. It's generations of sacrifice, commitment, work, effort, reputation, all of that tied into this. There were so many emotions, TJ. I got to tell you that walking out of the office, getting into the car to drive, probably longest ever. And, this despair, this disappointment, this worry, this, concern. Is this ever going to happen?
right.
So all of that was intertwined. In that moment, there was also the rebellion that occurred because I rebelled against the system.
Absolutely.
In that very moment. And that took hold. That spark lit a fire. That fire turned into a national debate. And so that moment, while I may have felt what I felt in the moment, was bigger than so much that I went through and greater than what I experienced in that moment. And looking back, I'm humbled by the ripples that moment caused, that I still get to see today when young men and women and others who have they had struggled with their identity and come to me and said, I didn't know which way to go. And then I saw your video and I read about your story.
Wow.
And I'm standing here because a young, Muslim woman came to me in Ottawa, and I was speaking at a committee hearing in Parliament on human rights. And she came to me, and she was in tears. She says, I struggled with my identity because I didn't know if I could wear my hijab or should wear my hijab. And she goes, I saw your video, I saw your story, and it gave me courage, and I stand here before you with my hijab because of you.
Wow.
She goes, can I give you a hug? Absolutely. I said, absolutely, dear sister.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So those moments are exactly what that, single sort of drop of that pebble in that lake has done, and those
Amazing.
ripples
And I mean, those are the after effects.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But your drive home, like you said, is the longest. What made you say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going back and knocking that door down. What changed you at that moment? Because like you said, there were other options. You had applied everywhere else, and it could have been, well, I'll wait till something else comes through. But you're like, no, I'm this far. What lit that fire? What happened?
Yeah. But the truth hadn't changed.
Yeah.
The truth that brought me there was still the truth. Was I of value? Yes. Was there a need? Yes. Is there a space to serve? Yes. Are all of the things that brought me to the moment, service, commitment, representation, the need of the community, the satisfaction that I experienced in that time of volunteer work and being a summer student, and the opportunities that I saw not only for myself but for my community, all of that was still true.
Right.
All of that was still true. So given that, you qualify, but you don't fit the picture we've got of a Mountie on a black horse with a Stetson, was not the reason why all those truths now become lies. So pursue the truth.
Wow. And so that rejection, it's probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was probably your first battle with leadership now, right? And what did that teach you about leadership?
Know your worth.
Yeah. Okay. Know your worth.
Know your worth. So truth gives you many sort of reflections on who you are and what you bring to the table. And that's your worth. If you have a truthful account of your value and a truthful account of how you can serve and provide and give into whatever place, whether you're a doctor, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a police officer, whether you're a podcast, officiant, if you know your truth, then that becomes your worth. And that worth is yours. Nobody can take that away from you. So hold on to that. Be clear about that. Be confident about it. And then others will come to see it. But if you don't have that confidence that comes from the worth, that comes from the truth, then why would you ever expect anyone else to see it?
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And you're spot on. But given the influence of social media today, and I don't think people know who they are, let alone their truth, right? How does one find that? How does one seek that?
Yeah, it's work. It's work. None of it comes as a moment of clarity. It is tried and tested. You have to go out, you have to do things, you have to commit, you have to give yourself into those spaces. And it's work. I came into this country when I was 16 years old. What does a 16-year-old know? What I did know were the truths that were shared with me by my father.
Yeah.
Service. It's a truth. Speaking and living in honesty. That's a truth. Living with dignity. That's a truth. Respect. That's a truth. So those became values. Now you have to nurture those values. Otherwise, values mean nothing if you just speak of them. They have to turn into action. And that action then begins to create your own legacy and your own path. My father's legacy will only carry me so far. His values will carry me further if I apply them. So I knew, though, the worth of those values. So when I started in the farms and, put whatever word you want in front of Barry, I picked it, all right? Every day, all day long, 7 days a week, throughout the summers. But in even those spaces, kindness, compassion, caring for others, these values, these truths were with me. So I would see elderly people in these farms picking blueberries, strawberries, and my heart would sink literally because I would see these elderly 70, 80 years old people picking berries, and then they would have to carry these buckets of berries, 30, 40 pounds each, and they would struggle because these rows were as long as a football field.
Wow.
Right? And so they would have to carry these buckets of berries to the truck get them weighed so that they would get their card stamped. So after about the first week or so seeing all of this, I went to my mother who picked with me and I said, "Can I go help them?" Now, she knows the truths and the values that we were all raised with: kindness, compassion, service, all of the things that I've spoken about. And her only answer to me would have been yes. She could not say to me, "No, I want you to pick our berries." Right. Let them be. That was not a thing.
Right.
So, but I still needed her permission because I was there with her. She goes, "Yes, but go."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
So I went to their rows and I would pick up their buckets and I would take it to the end of the row, take their card, get them. And at first there was mistrust. Like, why is this boy doing this? Why is he walking away from his row
Yes.
and taking our cards? Is he going to get his own card?
Right.
So they would walk with me just to make sure because they weren't sure. They trust, right?
Yes.
So then they saw that, yes. I said, "Nee, Babaji, you keep picking. I'll come back.
Yeah.
I'll bring more buckets for you." And so I started doing that with row. So I hardly picked anything for us, but I moved all those buckets. At the end of the day, the farmer, after about, a week or two, saw that there were more berries that were being picked because I was faster with those buckets,
Right.
getting them. And he gave me an hourly job just to do that because he saw the profit in it.
Right.
That's not where I started, but that's where the universe brought me. And because of that value, because of that trust, because of that truth, it also paid itself. And now I was making more than everybody.
Right.
Because now I was at an hourly rate. Right? So this is how I have seen the universe work. This is how I've experienced it. So it's given me a lot of confidence. So I don't worry a lot when I take that step off that edge, not knowing what's on the other side, because I know my truth, the values that I trust in, and the legacy of my forefathers absolutely have that path clear, and will be just fine. Just take the leap.
That's incredible. So, I mean, I'll go back to the same question I had, was your drive back, but it wasn't about the moment in the drive. It was all the small moments before it that built up to that,
Correct.
which led you to make that decision.
Yes.
That's incredible. And so, in our drive in, we were talking about the truths as well, and the moments when no one's watching, right? And you're making those decisions in favor for someone who's going to benefit from it,
Right.
without them ever knowing.
Correct.
But you've stood by the truth, right? Those are the moments that shape you. So it's not, you get up one day and you become an RCMP officer, and you
absolutely.
fought for your rights. It's you fought all the way along,
No.
and you stood up for what's right.
And let's get rid of this sort of misnomer, or misunderstanding, or misinterpretation, of a sense that there are going to be times where we're alone and no one knows what we're doing. If you believe in the universe, every flutter of a wing is going to have an impact somehow. What is it that you are putting into that universe? So whether you're alone or with somebody else, if you are guided by your values and your truths, and you have that trust, then whatever you put out is exactly what you're going to get in return. So you're never alone. FYI, so those folks think that, hey, I'm alone, I can do whatever I want.
Think again.
I'm telling you something else. That's not how this works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And listen, we have a conscience, right? Like
Yes.
I always tell my kids the same thing. I'm like, listen, whether you lie to someone else, you can't lie to yourself.
Correct.
Right? You know what you're doing in those moments. And so if you can get through those moments by being truthful, then there's nothing else that that can harm you or touch you, for that matter. It's because you're fighting for the right cause. You're standing for the right cause.
Absolutely. Aspire. At the end of the day, we were still imperfect beings, and we make mistakes. And I want everyone to have that comfort that mistakes are part of our growth. It's okay. It's good. Aspire. Continue to look for opportunities where you can reach for that goal and objective. When you fail, that's perfectly fine. It's good. You learn from that. If there's no darkness, you will never see that flame of the candle, right?
Yeah.
You need to have the opposite. And so it is important that we fall and scratch our knees and break a bone here and there, right? It teaches us resilience.
Exactly. No, one of our rules at home is the word fail stands for first attempt in learning. That's it.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, like, all the systems around us are training us otherwise.
Correct.
Right? If you fail and your life is over, and if you fail and this happens, but every business, every opportunity, everything I've done, it's by trial and error. You learn, you try something, you learn from it, you pivot, you change, and then you move on to it. Whether it was my career at Microsoft or whether it was me as an entrepreneur, it was all through trial and error. But if I thought I was going to hit everything on the first shot, I'd be lying to myself, and I'd be completely wrong, right? And if I gave up, more importantly, after that first shot, then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, and you wouldn't have done what you've done.
No,
Right?
when the opportunity came where I had the privilege of hiring people into my teams, that was a big part of that hiring process. Is I wanted to hear about their mistakes. I wanted to hear about their failures. When I started running my own team, we had a folder called Celebrations. And people would walk in, I say, hey, we got a folder called Celebrations, and we do an interview. And they say, oh, that's fantastic, you're celebrating anniversary. I said, no. We're celebrating mistakes, because that folder's got all of our mistakes in it.
I love that.
And because from every mistake, we've been able to be better. Yeah. And so I would absolutely hire someone who comes in there and has 10 failures, because they are going to be so much better, smarter, greater, and more intuitive than someone who's never experienced it, never done it, and has been afraid to do so. So yeah, you're absolutely correct.
On the topic of leadership from there, right? Like that's true leadership, where you're not only leading, but you're leading by example. You're open to the failures and the mistakes, and you're actually celebrating them. Leaders. So are they born or are they made?
I think there are some traits that come with you. I believe that you bring that into this world, and those are things that we as parents, I think, and that's why I say you're never alone. Whatever you're doing, you're passing on to some place, somewhere. I think that comes through those genes. I think that there's something to be said about, what we bring into this world and what's been gifted to us through our parents, and how that all comes to part. But then you've got to do something with it. You've got to do something with it. We've got some great leaders in organized crime.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're hurting people. You're causing havoc. People are dying, and that's not leadership. That's not leadership. We see people around the world that are in leadership roles that are causing havoc, mayhem, more pain and injury. So we have to define what leadership is, because leadership is not just, being able to lead. It also means leading in what space, in doing what's your end goal, what is the objective that you're driving. So like I said, I've sat across, some incredible leaders, but they led organized crime groups. They could have been a CEO of a company, but they decided to put all of their energy and effort into creating harm daily, and injury and pain and death.
And it's a perfect example you give there. So sometimes when I'm watching documentaries, I kind of think the same as well. Those leadership skills are transferable, right? So to your point, instead of putting them towards the negative side of things, can you put them towards positive?
Correct.
Right? And now you're building communities, you're helping people with their own livelihood, with their families, right? Are they transferable? And what requires people to actually make that switch?
Yeah.
Right. Is that now going back to their values, their upbringing? And sometimes some people play victim,
Absolutely.
right? And they say, this is what the world has done to me, so therefore I'm going to do this. But not everyone gets a easy pass, right?
Yeah.
Like what you said, you were rejected, right? You could have said, the world did this to me, so I'm going to go the opposite of RCMP, right?
Yeah.
You could have done that,
Yeah.
but you didn't. What's the message to people that are in that place now where they've been rejected, they've been turned down, they're not getting the answers that they're looking for, and they're now resorting to either, theft or violence or other things to make ends meet? Can they take their skills, their abilities, and transfer them into something else? And where does it start?
Betray yourself, betray your values, betray your trusts, and what you'll be left with is betrayal at the end of the day. Don't expect anything more from that. There might be a short period of success, short sort of joy of seeing what it is that you're chasing after, whether it's money or fame or something else. But that will fizzle out. I've seen it over and over and over and over again. It doesn't last long. It doesn't last. It's not there. There's no power in it. The power is from being steadfast. The power is being principled. The power is having an understanding of where your values are. And I've said this before, that Olympic sprinter didn't show up on, the day of the race.
Right.
And say, I got this.
Yeah.
No.
No, not happening.
No. That's 25 years of work, of daily commitments, of every day. For that short 100 meter, 400 meter sprint, hours.
Yeah.
And the years that you've had to put into it to be able to say, yeah, I did it. Okay, well, that's commitment, that's dedication, that's being steadfast to the end goal. So no shortcuts here, folks.
No.
Bottom line. I've had that conversations with others, and I picked berries. And I was a security guard after that. I did a number of other jobs. I was rejected when I went to try to go into and get a job at fast food restaurants because I looked like this. And I said, yeah, no, thank you. We don't need you. Right. And back then it was just that blatant. Thank you very much. Don't hire people like you. Right. So, but so what? We live in Canada. There are people, there are places around this world where you can't get fresh water. That's struggle. When you have to get up every morning and wonder if you're going to get fresh water, that's struggle. When you have to get up every morning and wonder if you're going to have a meal that day, that's struggle. look, we're in a very, very good place here. We got a lot of opportunities, a lot of means. And as I say to my daughters, work hard, hustle, stay true to your values, and look to how you can contribute. And things will open up. Things will become available to you. But don't give up.
Senator, there are a lot of people that are trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get jobs. They're trying to figure things out, their career. And it's not even about ends meet. It's just they're in a routine that's so busy. You talked about values. Like, how do you pull yourself out and stay connected to what's true? Like, even for business owners or corporate professionals or, public government employees or whoever it is, how do you divide that time up and say, you know what, I have to serve my community, or I have to give back? I'm guilty of it, right? I try to. It's an added effort where we have to kind of go out of our way and say, oh, you know what, I have to do this, and it's not consistent, it's not constant. That you're kind of struggling with that fight. What's your advice on how do people make that just a part of their life?
Look, finding balance in how we show up every day is work. It's effort, and you do need to think about that. But service is, in many ways, service is you walking down the street and sharing a smile with someone. You lifted that person up. So can you do that? That's serving. Service is, and I've said this to many, if you have wealth and you're well-to-do, the easiest thing you can do is give some money to somebody that is showing up every day, volunteering, putting that organization together. And they have an annual gala. You come in there and give $10,000. Okay, well, that's the easiest service you've ever done.
Yeah.
What does that cost you? Because you've got money already, right? You've got that wealth. In other spaces whether it's mentoring somebody, or being available to someone online who's going through some struggle. So there's many ways to serve. But look, at the end of the day, all of that is only of value if you yourself first are at a place where you can be of service. First, serve yourself. First, figure things out for yourself. So I have a daily practice. I don't leave the home. I don't get into any work until I finish my daily practice. Now, that was, dodgy some years ago. Like, I've been doing it now steadily for 18 years. I haven't missed a day. But prior to 18 years ago, I was like every other day, if I need jubji, I'd go back and get a jubji. If I felt like I needed a job side, I'd go and get a job side. Just feeling it out. It wasn't consistent.
Right.
And so there came a time in my life where I needed consistency. I needed a practice. I needed a place where I settled into it every day and did a check-in. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? What am I going to do tomorrow? What can I correct from yesterday? How do I do better today? And what am I going to look at tomorrow? So these things will grow. And as you spend time with yourself, which is not, people don't do that, FYI. People take vacations, go out on vacations, and then they spend time with a book.
Yes.
Or a movie or something else. Sitting with yourself and your own consciousness and your own voice is a practice that I think many of us still lack. And that is where clarity comes, in my view. And as I've often said, none of it is mine, all of it is through the universe. This conversation that we're having, much of what I've shared that I've been able to put together, not mine, it's what I've been able to put together through that practice. If you'd asked that 16-year-old or that 24-year-old back when I was, trying to get into the RCMP, I wouldn't have had these words to share with you because it was still shaping, forming. I just knew I needed to stand steady. I just had those values. I had that truth, and I just needed to be steadfast. And the rest of it formed over the years. Now I can speak to what that was. I can look at those principles. I can create a system. If you needed me to draw this out, I could. But it took time to figure that part out. So people run, organizations with hundreds of people within it. And I think the first question you got to ask that person is that if you needed to draw an org chart for yourself, what would that look like? What's your org chart? Who's at the top, right? And who do you serve?
Yeah.
And what are the others?
I love that. Yeah.
What's your org chart?
Yeah, because we only look at it from what we're seeing in the workplace. But you're right, like we don't have our own org chart. And we should have that.
Yeah.
I love that. The other one, you reminded me of a conversation when you're saying, sit with yourself. Our system punishes that. As kids, you get a 5-minute timeout, right? You're on your own. Like in our culture, historically, that was a blessing if you could be like for 5, 10, 15 minutes on your own.
Yeah.
But we penalize kids for that, right? It's like 5-minute timeout. That's a punishment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best blessing you can have, and that's the habit we have to do. Boredom. Like I tell my kids all the time, they're like, "Dad, I'm bored." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. Enjoy it."
Yeah.
Right? Sit
Yes.
down with yourself.
Yes.
No devices, and just let your imagination go to work. And that first 5 minutes feels the hardest. After that, they get so creative,
Yeah.
right? But it's a matter of like sitting with yourself.
Yes.
Right? And we don't have the patience for 5 minutes
Yes.
to sit with ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, we can binge watch for 5 hours, right? Your journey for the RCMP, your drive home, you get back in. There's a struggle that you go through.
Are we still there?
Yeah, well, I'm still there. I'm still there. I'm still there.
I'm still driving home.
Yes, you're still driving home. It's a long
Okay,
drive.
all right.
You said it was a long drive.
It was like that.
We'll speed it up a bit.
Yes,
So
that's good.
so you've gone back in now. Now you're knocking these doors. What did that journey look like? So there's they've already said no.
Yeah.
You've decided that, you know what, this is the truth. This is the path I'm going down. This is what I'm standing for. I'm going to go. And now, what's that timeline until you get back in?
This is a national debate that started back in 1989. And once the word got out that there was a Sikh member of the Sikh community who wanted to become an RCMP officer, wanted to retain his articles of faith, and would like to wear his turban in place of the forage cap, this became national news. In so many ways, I'm glad there was no social media back then, because there's only 3 ways to get the news out: radio, TV, paper. Right. So, and it was every day. It was every day. I got, there was editorials, people that would, recognize me, other than those that thought everybody looked the same. So they would talk about it to everybody who looked like me, which is also great because I shared that the weight of it. I got both sides. Right, I got people who would say, this is not being Canadian. You're changing our culture. This is a symbol of Canada. How dare you think that you are to be considered equal here, that you somehow are a Canadian. It was an incredible time where I absolutely did question whether we belonged, whether we had equal footing here, whether this country was ready to live up to its promise of multiculturalism, right? And it was a difficult journey, but also a journey that brought about a lot of self-reflection, truths that I had to face, on my commitment to my own identity. All of those things were part of that sort of processing, if you will. And when the day came that we'd gone through all of this, the petitions had been signed, 275,000 people signed a petition. Remember, this is back in 1989, 1990, where you couldn't just go online and click a button saying, that's what you had to make a plan. You had to get up in the morning, figure out where these people were, that had these petitions, take a bus, transit, drive to that mall, and take your ID with you, sign that piece of paper, and then, and there's your petition, right? So people did that. 275,000 people did that across Canada. The question that came, and so the charter came in 1983, right? And the charter gives us the, freedom of expression and to be able to practice our different faiths. That was the test now, right? Is this what Canada looks like? Or is this what Canada looks like, right? And so when that question came up for the commissioner and government and others in authority, and the only time one could be denied their articles of faith is if there was a bona fide occupation reason that by keeping your articles of faith, you would be in a hazard or a risk. And I can tell you my turban is far more secure than a forage cap, right? When it comes to preventing any harm to my brain, to my head, or taking any kind of hit. So that was not a reason. So that went out of the way. Now it was simply a decision around, can we accept these people into the ranks of the RCMP and into the fabric of this nation as part of the institution? And this is where I was so grateful that Canada came true. Canada came and lived up to its promise. And that ink that was on that paper on the Charter of Rights leapt up and became the truth for me. Now, that is a very romantic story about that, which I hold on to dearly because it's important, it's critical, because those ideals are important. Whatever else happens, happens. But we live up to those ideals, those aspirations. And we must celebrate them. It's absolutely important we celebrate them. But just imagine this, and you asked what was like going into the organization and, and leaving the space. So think about a gate. And on the other side of the gate is me dealing with all the community, the society, all of the things. They had signs across Canada with the faces of Sikhs and a no entry sign on it. They had pins that they had made, because no protest should go without enamel pins. And they had calendars, mocking caricatures of Sikhs. Literally, it was a campaign of dehumanizing an entire community, an entire segment of Canadians, and making them less, both in their own value and also in the larger diaspora of this country. So that's before the gate. And then the day comes and say, no, you're good. We will change.
Right.
1990, right? In July of 1990, that change came. Now I cross the gate and go into the institution. Well, it's not rosy there either, because I'm walking into an institution now, which is even more compressed with all of the things on the outside of that gate. Because now I'm confronting an institution of decades that have been entrenched. And this is a paramilitary institution. Yeah. So the challenges and the issues became more focused, more compressed, more targeted when I walked through that gate. On the other side of this gate, I was somebody in Canada. On the other side of that gate, I was Constable Dhillon of the RCMP, the only one in a force of 20,000 members.
On the outside of the gate, before you're in, you can actually go raise, concerns and raise issues and talk about this stuff. Now you're part of the institution.
Yeah.
Raising that is more challenging than anything else, because now your job's at risk, and who are you going up against, all that. What was that struggle against?
Fantastic. It was just incredible. My first complaint was the day I graduated. I think I broke the record. Some lady out in Eastern Canada saw me graduating, and I was hugging all of my fellow police officers, colleagues that were graduating. Yeah. I was the only one. Everybody was doing it. People had done it before. People were doing it after. But she saw me on TV because I made the news, and complained that this was conduct unbecoming of a police officer, that I was hugging others.
Wow.
Yeah. So the complaint was taken, again, Eastern Canada somewhere, was accepted by some staff sergeant. And and the description was, I don't know who this person is, but he wears a turban.
Wow.
Being the only one of the RCMP, it didn't take him long to figure out who it was. Yeah, so that there wasn't a lot of investigative work that needed to be done there. And so the complaint was taken. It went to Ottawa. It was accepted there. It went to Vancouver, accepted there. Came to Prince George, which was a subdivision of the north, where I worked in Quesnel, British Columbia. That is where Superintendent Randy Epp phoned me up and said, Baltej, you will never see this complaint. And his language, I am pissed off that there are people before me in leadership roles that entertained this complaint. I am ripping this up, and I'm writing a letter back down the chain. This came, letting everyone know my feelings. He said, but I owe it to you. It's my duty to let you know that there was a complaint. There is no longer a complaint. I've dealt with it.
Wow.
Hell, I should. First time I learned about that. I didn't know I had friends. I did. My first set of friends were my troop mates when I went through Regina, where I got letters threatening me, postcards from all across Canada. I was there for 6 weeks or so, and our troop counselor, one of the corporals, came in and said, so how are you making out? How are things going for you? I said, wow, fantastic. I'm getting fan mail from all over the country. He said, well, that's turned around, hasn't it? I said, yeah, I suppose so. I said, do you want to read some of them? He said, yeah. And I said, I've got a shoebox here. Here you go. So he picked out the first card. In those cards was, if you come to such and such a town, don't bring your family with you because we need somewhere to send your remains.
Wow.
If you come to such and such a town, we already have a plot in the cemetery picked out for you. If you come to such and such a town, we have a reception for you. Whenever you're not in uniform, come see us. So that kind of tone and so on. Every 10th or 15th card, it would be, hey, great job. We're, pulling for you. Corporal got quite disturbed by it. He was visibly shaken. This was commonplace for me. I was
Right.
been hearing about it before. Now I'm just getting it in written form, so I could have he said, Baltej, do you realize that this is threats against a police officer? I said, well, they've been threatening me for a while, so I'm sure. I said, so I'm going to take all these letters and we're going to start an investigation on each one of them, right? When I graduated, I came back to Vancouver. I was preparing for my sister's wedding, and members of the police security, the VIP security came to talk to me, and they said, we need to speak to you. You need to come to headquarters. I had atta all over me, flour all over me. I said, now? He said, yeah, now. And so I went downtown, met with the superintendent there, and he said, we have a credible threat against your life. We're prepared to move you and your family. I said, my sister's getting married tomorrow. I'm not moving anywhere. I can't. What are you talking about? So, okay, well, then you have to sign this waiver. So I signed a waiver saying I'm good. I don't need protection. They found the person. They had a person that was making it would call every time he would see me on TV, he would call a local detachment and say, I'm going to put a bullet in this guy's head. So
Wow.
they were investigating that. So those kinds of things happened along the way. Yeah.
You talked about allyship in there. You talked about having friends that
Yeah.
you didn't know were there. How does one make friends like that? How do you get into that? Because that comes into trust, right? And it's usually difficult building trust and finding people that you can trust, and it's a two-way street. And so sometimes you haven't done anything except showed up,
Yeah.
and someone's already trusting you. A lot of people take a look at that as doubt as well. It's like, oh, what does this person want? They get very, I guess, skeptical of what the other person's intents are and all. How did you navigate that? And then how would one navigate that when they're faced with such a situation? Because sometimes they're questioning, why is someone looking out for me, or what's their interest in this?
Who's the constant in that is a question that I would ask anyone. If you continue to change and shift and be different in every place that you go to, you'll never know what's constant, because you'll have different kind of reactions every single time. But if you remain constant, still, figure out who you are, go back to where we started from.
Yeah.
What's your worth, right? What's your value? What's your truth? Be clear about that. And when you know what your constant is, then you can figure out where others are standing. I'll give you an example. My first day at Quesnel Detachment, my staff sergeant calls me into his office after my graveyard shift, worked all night, and I get into his office. I'm standing at attention, and he says, I don't care for you. I don't care for what you got on your turban, on your head. I think RCMP made a big mistake, and I wish you weren't here in this detachment.
Wow.
That was my welcome, right? And he said one thing I grabbed onto that and walked out. And he said, well, as long as you do your job, you'll never have any problems with me. I said, staff, thank you very much. Don't need anything else from you. I said, yeah, dismissed. I hung on to that. Do my job. So I showed up. I did my job. I did my job more than I was required to. And I share with my daughters the same philosophy. Show up 10 minutes early, leave 20 minutes later. They ask you to do 3 things, do 10.
Yeah.
Show up. So I did that every day. They asked me to do work. I did more. I kept taking files. I did extra work in the community, made myself, and kept showing up as who I was. I remained truthful to who I was. 2 years to the day, same staff sergeant is about to leave. He's retiring. He's in a car. We just did our final shoot. We're coming back to the detachment. We stop in front of the detachment. The maroon color Caprice. I still remember it. And I'm sitting in the passenger side. No, I was driving. He was in the passenger side, and he looked over and he says, Baltej, you're like a son to me.
Wow.
I said, Bob, what do you mean? Now we're on first name basis, right? And he said, well, why'd you have that laugh? Why'd you smirk? I said, remember what you said to me? And I said, what did I say? I shared all that. I said, that's because you didn't even look at me that day.
Yeah.
And he had a tear in his eye. He said, I was wrong. I was wrong. So who was a constant there? He changed. He shifted. He moved from where he was. So build trust, but build trust through being your own self, being constant. Know your worth.
Yeah.
Know your value. And if you show up, one of the corporals, a wonderful friend, Sean, Walton, incredible mentor to me, and others through my career, and I've learned so much over the years. And one of the things that I learned very, very early on, and I share this with others now, is that, find opportunities where you can shine. So when you see people running that way, you run that way. Because when you get to wherever people are running from, you will find yourself in a place where you now have a challenge,
Yeah.
where nobody else is there. Two things will happen. You will succeed. You'll be remembered as a hero. You will fail, and you'll be remembered for trying. But what's the constant? You'll be remembered.
I love that. I love that. That's brilliant. And I think, the theme that I'm kind of capturing here is going back to our values, right? Being true to who you are. You kind of reminded me of a couple of stories. One is in one of my jobs, I was managing a team, and one of the directors came in, and my team lead must have done something wrong, and they wanted to basically get him off the project. And I'm like, sure, let's figure out what needs to be done, and let's get him off the project. But they came back and they said, but we're not going to fire him. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, if you want him off the project, we fire him. And they came back and said, no, we're going to actually demote him and let him sit here until he leaves on his own, so we don't have to pay him out. And that didn't sit well with me. So I was supposed to, because I was the manager, I was supposed to sign the paperwork. I called up my friend in HR. She was the one that was watching over the case. And I said, her name was Kelly. I said, Kelly, I can't sign. I can't put my name on that paper. And she's like, well, this is just, a process. We have to do it. I said, I'm telling you this, but I'm going to call the director and say, I had a flat tire and I can't make it in. So someone else has to sign that paper, but I'm not putting my name on it. And that didn't sit well with me. And at that point, instead of sending them an email saying that I can't do it, I resigned. I resigned from that position. But the backlash of that, not just, losing the job. I'm 26 at this time, at this point. Family, parents, like, what are you doing? What are you fighting this for? Right? Just sign the paper. But I couldn't. Right. So there's that aspect of knowing your values where you have to step away. You have to walk away from that.
Correct.
And then the second thing you talked about is having the identities. If they ask you to do 3 things, you do 10, right? I was, I think, 6 months into a role at one of the companies, and this is where I met, now one of my best friends. And he walks up to me. He goes, I've been here 6 years. You've been here 6 months. People don't know who I am, and how does everyone know who you are? And I said, do you want the real answer? He's like, yeah. I just pointed out my turban. I said, this is why. I'm like, so when I show up, if I show up and do something bad, everyone remembers. But if I show up and do something really well, everyone remembers.
Correct.
Right. So it's up to me to see how I want to show up. And again, it goes back right to the values.
1000%. And I just want to say, we're talking about some, incredible sort of pieces that shape who we are, form who we are, and ultimately reward who we are. But I want folks to know, those who are in leadership, it's a game of averages, right? You're not going to succeed every day. You're not going to be your best every day. You're not going to fulfill all that you aspire to every day. You will make mistakes. And sometimes you may even do something that's wrong. And there's a big difference between mistakes and wrong. But the push has to be, okay, I can be better. I can do better. And so it's the average over a period of time that you have to look at as to where have you landed. Have you landed on average near or close to where you aspire to be on a daily basis? And if you can continuously do that, then you're there. As I go through Duolingo trying to learn French, I'm reminded of that average every day, that here's where you want to land, as you be purposeful, be deliberate in your actions. And as you become more expert in understanding your value, your truths, in having that recognition, you will begin to hit that average and that high note more often. No different than that, Olympic runner who first started out with a dream saying, I'm going to be a gold medalist, walking on a street somewhere, and that was the dream. Well, he didn't become an Olympic medalist the next day. Probably didn't even do well the next day. You aspire, you shoot for that. And over time, that's where your average is going to be. And you look at sports teams and others, we look at averages. That's what we look at. Because we know that not every game is going to be the best. Not every time you shoot, you're going to be, it's going to be in the net. The question is, do you show up? Are you aspiring? Are you doing all the things that you need to do to be your very best self in that moment. And if that is all in place, then the chances are, all of the science tells us and all of the research tells us that you'll have the best chance of scoring.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And you know, when you talk about averages, it's really about showing up your best. And again, I tell my daughters this all the time. I was like, you're competing with yourself, right? Be 1% better every single day. Understand where
Fantastic.
you are, and that's all you have to do.
Brilliant.
Like, forget competing with anyone else.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's not about, because everyone has a different journey. We forget that.
Yeah.
We forget every aspect of that, right? So when we're competing with someone else who might get 98 in their grade, we don't know what their upbringing was. We don't know how, if they started learning at the age of 4 or whatever have you.
Yeah.
And I tell my daughters the same thing. I said, listen, like, my eldest, who's 16 right now, she's building her businesses. She's, coding, she's building websites, she's doing all of that. But for someone to look at it and say, look at that 16-year-old, what are you doing? Yeah, but she started at 6.
Yeah.
Right. I introduced her to coding and development and software development, all that at 6, just to get her, used to it. She was doing AI at 9.
Wow.
We can't compete with any other 16-year-old with that. I'm sorry. Like, it's not part of it. And the same thing goes for us.
Yeah.
Because we look at it and say, well, that person's this age and look how they're, but what did they start from?
Correct.
We forget that. And we forget those averages, like you said, that add up over time.
Correct.
To really put you at a certain spot.
Correct.
And the inverse is true. If we're not putting our effort through, then that becomes the average.
Absolutely.
So what's the life we want?
1000%. No shortcuts. Yeah. All of it is hard work. All of it takes purpose. All of it requires a plan. So, and all of it starts with first knowing what your worth is. And if that is in place, and that's key, and that comes from those values that shape your truths, that shape your worth, then the rest of it starts to fall in place. If you are not this is in self-defense as well, if you don't have your base very founded, if your base is not strong, you don't have your, stance right, someone could walk over and simply lean on you and you'd fall over. Yeah. So work on the base before you begin to defend yourself or try to defend or try to attack. So until that base is there, nothing else is going to work out.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of people, again, will resort to conditions and situations and what life has given them. We have the ability to change that path. And I was just made aware literally 2 months ago that my dad told me that his father, which is my grandfather, was an orphan at the age of 6. And he built everything from the ground up. Yeah. And he could have looked at everything and said, hey, this was life. Yeah. Right. And equated to nothing. But that's not the path he chose.
No. It's all about choices. And I say this to everyone I meet. This is a land of opportunity. Yeah. What you do with it is up to you. Somebody gives you a gold mine, but you choose never to dig. There's not going to be any gold to be had. No. That's just the truth. We came into this country with $400 in our pocket. And someone said, I said that at one time, and it was in a gathering. He said, I came here with $5 in my pocket. I said, I know it's not a competition. I'm sure you did. Yes. I'm not suggesting that it's a competition. I'm just saying we didn't have very much. Yeah. Lived in a small home, 6 of us in that home, and we struggled. Yeah. There was a lot of struggle, right? There was also opportunity. There was also hope. There was also dreams. And so I think when we talk about leadership starts with your own self. You talk about service. You can be of service in the place of work that you're in. I mean, one of the things that I did when I started to lead teams, and again, I don't use the word lead, I use the word serve. And I never nobody worked for me, everybody worked with me. One of the first few things I did was I inverted the org chart in our office. And I can tell you, Microsoft Word didn't allow me to do that. It would continuously struggle. I could not do it upside down. So I had an org chart that was upside down. I was on the bottom and everybody else was up. It was an inverted triangle. People walk into the office and say, oh, sir, you've got this upside down. I said, no, that's the right side up. Yeah. I'm here to serve you. Because if I cannot serve you in this role, then I am failing this role. My job is to support you, serve you, so that you can be successful, and your job is to serve those that are above you. Yeah. Those are philosophies. That's how you show up. That's how you create space. We talk about safe spaces. They don't just happen by accident. Yeah. Right? You've got to create them. You've got to give that trust. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to allow people to point a finger at you and say, this is where you're failing. And so if you're open to all of that, willing to receive that, able to bring about changes, win the trust of others, that's serving. I still talk to employees and people that I worked with from back then who I still stay in touch with. And they continue to share with me how that was the greatest, the most important time, the most inspiring time of their lives, what they learned from there, and how they've now been able to shape some of their careers as a result of it.
No, it's amazing. And just the point of, gold mine that you talked about, right? And so what I look at is, and this again, I tell my kids this as well, the fact that we're healthy and able.
Yeah.
That is a gold mine in itself.
Absolutely.
We have opportunities everywhere, especially with the technology we have access to today.
True.
Right? There's no reason why we cannot build, establish, or do something that is outside of what we've been taught. And I was having a conversation with my wife just a couple of days ago, right? And I said, the mindset in India used to be like, if someone's a driver, then your son's going to be a driver, and then so on. Like that's just how it was.
Yeah.
That's all gone.
No.
And so we have a huge land of opportunity everywhere we are, where we have an internet connection, we have the ability.
Correct.
No, this is incredible, and I love the conversation center, and and everything we're kind of talking about. One of the things I want to touch on is we have the drive. You got into the gate. We're past the drive now.
Yeah.
Is the system.
Yeah.
Changing the system from within.
Yeah.
It's no easy feat. Like it's not something you just wake up and say, okay, we're done. We changed one, and we're gonna that's where the battle really began.
Yeah.
More than anything else, I think, I would think the first part was easy to a certain extent, not easy at all by any means, but in comparison, because now you have the threats, you have leadership that's against you. I remember hearing one of your other talks where you were saying that your own partners didn't have your back.
Correct.
Right. I mean, that's a scary place to be in.
Yes.
How did you change all of that? Again, I know you talk about trust and stuff like that, but how do you win trust with someone who's skeptical of who you are and what you represent?
Yeah. Firstly, trying to change things from the inside has been a lifelong journey, and I don't think I changed everything. Be ready to fail.
Yeah.
Be ready to accept that failure, not by giving up, but recognizing that is one of the outcomes that you will face. That failure will come. And as I gained more influence and more standing and status, no different than any place, no different than anything else, and had a track record of work, of showing up, of being able to do the things that a play, and no longer just a pretty face with a turban on. I mean, that's okay as well, but that's not how I wanted to be remembered. I mean, I've said this many times, and people have actually come to me and said, no, you don't need to say that. I said, well, I think it's important. I did not want to be just remembered, because that's not why I started out down this journey. I didn't join the RCMP to change the RCMP.
Right.
I joined the RCMP to serve, to be a police officer. I wanted to be remembered as a good police officer. If I could hit excellent, great. But good was also perfect, given all the things that I was struggling with, and that I made changes, that I was able to contribute, that I did things within the RCMP as a police officer that made our community, our country safer. And so that was always the goal, and that was always the fear, to some extent, that drove me every day. That when I showed up at work, I knew that I was on an uphill battle. I wasn't on an even keel. I wasn't on an even playing field with others. When they were ready to run the track, I knew I had weights on my ankles and a parachute on my back.
Wow.
That's the race I ran, right? So while others had brand new Nike shoes, I was bare feet.
Yeah.
So knowing that, you needed to do more. Absolutely. But here's the benefit of doing more. I don't know if you remember the first Conan movie. Conan was, kidnapped, and then they put him to work on this, I don't know what it was, some sort of water thing. But you see him grow, and then you see this little kid, and all the others fall apart, and then you see this massive, Conan come out of that. And that's how I saw some of what happened, is that the more you are challenged, the more you face resistance, and the more you confront these indifferences, the greater you grow, the more strength you accumulate, as long as you are resilient, as long as you keep pushing like he did, right? Yeah. And so I remember so many examples, and one of the analogies I use is that you can be a lump of iron, steel in a corner, or you can be picked up by the universe, thrown in the forge, hit on the anvil, back in the forge, hammered on the anvil again, back and forth, until that piece of metal becomes a sword that can be wielded and is honored and is held with so much power and strength. So the question becomes, where do you want to be? In that corner, or go through the forge and the anvil to be more? I saw every one of those times where I was confronted in the moment. I got to tell you, it was hard. It was very, very hard. Did I go into a corner and had a little cry? Absolutely, 1,000%. Were there days that I was incredibly disappointed because someone else was chosen over me? 1,000%. What the next day brought was even more determination, saying I'm not going to give them a reason, or excuse, or an opportunity to ignore me. Every time I think many times I applied for different positions, I would never be considered. I was even told I didn't fit the role, but I kept at it. And I found different ways to show up. Because the one superpower I realized that I had was that I could relate to people and I could talk to people. And over time, reciprocity works, in amazing ways. I still remember in my early days in Cornell, one of the sergeants that I would, we would go out for coffee. After about 3 years, 4 years, he said, Baltej, I realized I don't even see a turban anymore. Right? Because we had gotten past our biases now, and we had gotten to the place where we just saw each other for who we were. And once that's put aside, once we've dealt with all of those things, now we just look at your capabilities, your values, what you bring to the table. So I knew that was there. I knew I could leverage that. It would take time, but I kept at it. And once I learned these lessons, then I absolutely exploited them. And you've got to. When you know you have a superpower, exploit it, use it, be very, very good at it. I ran for provincial elections here 2 years ago. I got to tell you, I was sobering when I went out and knocked on doors. And I got a different, sense of respect and appreciation for anyone that walks into political service and public service. I can't tell you how many times in Surrey I would knock on doors and people say, "Wow, you don't have accent, eh? That's pretty good." I said, "Well, thank you very much. You do. Are you from British? Are you from England?
Yeah.
How long have you been here?" Right? So it's interesting that we're still having to struggle with some of those because there are still biases that get in the way of us seeing the other for their full self.
Yeah, no, spot on. I did a post on LinkedIn, I think it was 6 to 8 months ago. And I was walking to a restaurant with a friend of mine in Portland and we're ordering breakfast. He's like, my friend's here from a far away place. He didn't say Canada. He said a far away place. She made her assumptions and she goes, "Wow, you speak really good English."
Yeah.
And so that became my post and it went viral. But that's to your point, right? We judge before we even understand or know. Right?
Yes.
So
100%. And not only others, even within our own community.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we do that more.
Yes.
We do that more, right? We just based on how we pronounce things and how we say things. So,
absolutely.
And we have to get past that, right? Yes. We have to get past that. And all of us as a society, right?
Yes.
Last question before we move on to what I call the rapid fire.
Sure.
Your best piece of advice that you ever got?
Show up. When people are running this way, you run that way.
Okay.
And show up and do your very best. If you succeed, you'll be remembered as a hero. If you fail, you'll be remembered for trying. But you showed up and you did what everybody else did not want to touch, do, or anything else. That's where opportunity lies. And in my career in the RCMP, I found so many times where I saw people running away from a job or a task. And, it happens. Yeah. And so every time that happened, I was like, I'm in. Here we go. Another opportunity by the universe. I created the first program, national a threat assessment program that targeted organized crime groups. And that, I was a staff sergeant at the time, a very, comparatively to who should have been doing this work, a lower rank police officer. But it was given to a director general. It was going to a senior analyst. It was going to somebody else. And they all came back and say, "Yeah, I'm too busy. I don't think I have time." And I just walked into the chief superintendent's office, and I said, "I'll do it." And he looked at me and he paused because there was doubt in his mind whether I could do it or not. And his reputation was tied to the success of this program. But he also knew he didn't have any choices. So I said, no, I'll do it, Chief. I got this. And he said, "You sure?" "There's still doubt." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what are your choices? Not doing it or having me try?" And he said, "Yeah, you're right." I said, "Give it to me."
Amazing.
So he gave it to me. We did it. And it's a national program. That would be my advice.
Amazing.
Is that yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. So, Senator, we're going to switch over to our rapid fire. I'm going to ask you a question. First thing comes to mind. Let's fire it off before we end our segment.
I'm scared.
Yeah, I'll go easy. Tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee.
Last thing you Googled.
Last thing I Googled was a young child who's struggling through a rare gene disease out in Surrey.
One person everyone should follow on LinkedIn right now besides you. Or besides me. Even.
Yeah, besides you or me. I don't know if I've got anybody there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. We'll put in the description if you got one afterwards.
Yeah, 100%.
If you didn't become an RCMP officer, what was the alternative?
Anything, but nothing that would compromise who I was.
Okay. Love that. I love that. One person who drastically changed your life.
My father.
I love that. Love that. Last one's a fun one. You might have to think hard about this one. If animals could talk, which would you want to have a conversation with outside of any pets you have?
An elephant.
An elephant?
Yes.
Now I'm curious. Why?
I think the perspective,
Okay.
and the saying that the memory of an elephant and all that the elephant sees, and its experiences and how it lives its life.
Amazing. Amazing. Senator Dhillon, thank you very much for being here. Had a blast having this conversation. I wish we had more time. I have a lot of questions. I still have to continue your journey as well. Maybe we'll have you back on again at some point.
Love to.
But there's so much, I guess, knowledge, wisdom, understanding that you have through your journey that I think the world needs to see more of and really reflect on, because there's a lot of lessons that are in there. At the surface level, success, we all see it in hindsight and everything looks great and wonderful. But when you really lift the covers, that's where you see all the scars, right? And I know you've got a number of those as well, and you share all that with a smile. So thank you very much for being here.
Grateful to you, TJ. Thank you for doing this. I think these are important conversations. The lived experiences that we bring and what we've been through. If we can offer a little bit to someone who may be moving through a time in their lives where some of this requires a little bit of adjustment and resyncing to who they are, then we've done our job. So I'm grateful to you for creating this space and allowing me to share a little bit of my journey.
Thank you, Senator. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.